Today, we celebrate our founder,
Walter P. Lomax Jr., MD.
Michael Kors.
When Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was in Philly and was sick, very sick, he needed a doctor. Everybody said, go see Dr. Walter P. Lomax Jr. And Dr. Lomax treated Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in Philly in 1968.
This is Word Radio, 96.1 FM.
And 900 AM WURD Philadelphia. Independent Black Media.
The views and opinions expressed by the guests, listeners, and hosts of any program on Word Radio do not necessarily reflect those of ownership, management, or advertisers of this station. Right now, on Word Radio, entrepreneurship, black innovation,
Founder Circle.
Can Philly's tech economy create black wealth? A Lomax Legacy panel, presented in partnership with The Plug, part of Word Founders Day.
Watch live right now on Word TV via Facebook.
Featuring Sherelle Dorsey, founder of The Plug, Heather Hiles, founder and CEO of Eminent Equity and Word contributor, Taib Smith, co-founder of Little Giant Creative, Tiffany Stenard, project manager of Word's Livelihood Initiative and founder of Stimulus, and Sylvester Mobley, founder of Coded by Kids. And now, your moderator for this Lomax Legacy panel discussion, Word host, Sincerely Sarita.
Hey loves, I am your host, Sincerely Sarita, and it's about that time, y'all. It's about that time for us to get into an important discussion in honor of Founders Day regarding entrepreneurship, black innovation, where we're at and where we go from here, right? So in case you're just tuning in, let's put this all into context for you. We have had all-day programming and will continue to have all-day virtual programming and celebration of the life and legacy of Dr. Walter P. Lomax Jr., founder of WURD Radio. If you don't know, he was a Philadelphia-born and bred physician, entrepreneur, philanthropist, and media owner. And with this particular conversation that we're getting ready to have, it's like impossible to even have a Founders Day and not hold an in-depth discussion around entrepreneurship, black wealth, and our livelihood. Dr. Lomax's legacy simply wouldn't and doesn't allow for it. In fact, it's impossible to have WURD Radio running for roughly, 18 years now, and not integrate a mission focused on the livelihood and economic empowerment of our people. So with that said, while one of our esteemed panelists, Tiffany Stenard, is founder and CEO of Stimulus, she's also project manager for WURD's Livelihood. So Tiffany, I want to start with you to make sure we take a moment and hear about livelihood and the exciting reintroduction of it to the world. So Tiffany, thank you for joining us. And what do we need to know about livelihood today on Founders Day?
Well, hi, everyone. I am so happy to be here to speak about this project that I've been working on for a few months now and was a part of last year as an entrepreneur. And Livelihood is an initiative of Word Radio connecting Philadelphia to jobs, entrepreneurship opportunities, small business resources, and financial literacy, and really helping Philadelphians understand what's available to them, whether it's you're trying to grow your business through funding and partnerships, or you're looking to start a new career, especially now around this time, and you're trying to figure out a new direction. How do we get you ready for your next career? How do we put the resources in front of you in one place to really allow you to find it quickly, as this year has been very stressful for, a lot of people. And it offers corporations, nonprofits, and others an excellent platform to really recruit diverse talent and connect with job seekers looking for work. So you can go to WRDworks.com. That's WRDWORKS.com to learn more.
Okay, so let's not make light of the fact that this is a major moment. Tiffany, I know you and the WURD team behind the scenes have been working so hard, not just on this website, but also on this initiative. So, definitely salute to you, sis, for putting in the long hours, the hard work, and getting this done. And that's in addition to all the other things that you have going on the entrepreneurial front, on the founder front, all of that. I just need to take a moment to make sure, you are being clapped up, and we appreciate you for all that you've done for our WURD family. And speaking of family, I want to take a moment to shout out everyone who is tuned in currently via 96.1 FM, 900 AM. Those of you who are streaming on Word TV via Facebook Live, the free Word app, which is available in the Apple app and Google Play stores, as well as YouTube. Know that this conversation is not just between the folks that you are hearing from. We're also looking to hear from you. So as we continue in this journey of, exploring Black innovation in proximity to the tech economy, we want to hear from you. I want to hear your questions. I want to hear your thoughts. So make sure if you're tuned in over on Facebook Live, and again, we're at onWURD over on Facebook, that you drop your questions and comments there. YouTube, we got that popping. Okay. So make sure you drop your feedback there. And then also you can call in 215-634-8065 and toll free 866-361-0900. Now, this is a Lomax Legacy panel presented in partnership with The Plug. And who better to speak to this partnership with The Plug than the woman behind The Plug herself. So with that said, Sherelle Dorsey, founder of The Plug, it is a pleasure to welcome you to this panel. Tell us a little bit about what The Plug is, its purpose and impact, and this partnership that we have with you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me this afternoon. It is really an honor to be a part of this esteemed panel, especially on a day-to-day really celebrating Dr. Lomax. I also just want to shout out Sarah, who's really carried the legacy forward. We are both Columbia Journalism School graduates, both very passionate about the ways in which our narratives show up in the world as Black and brown people, as innovators, as creators, as genius, as those who are working across different industries to ensure opportunities for many of us who don't necessarily get handed those opportunities, right? It always seems like an uphill climb. And I think the more that we continue to come together, the more we continue to learn together, the more we are able to have exponential impact across some of the most challenging issues within our communities. I started The Plug in 2016, having worked in startups, working full-time for places like Uber as a marketing manager, going into sales and marketing roles at Google Fiber, really being in the tech working world and not seeing a ton of representation or our stories told in a dignifying format or with a critical lens in business and in tech news. And as a young girl raised in Seattle, Washington, taught by a Black woman engineer, working at Microsoft in high school with internships, I know that the opportunity and the trajectories I was provided helped me to shape a reality for myself that I was able to see myself in these spaces of innovation. Gotcha. And it was confusing to me to not see those conversations happening out loud about what Black folks were creating and how they were contributing to the greater tech society and moving our future forward, even though we were always behind the scenes of some of the world's greatest inventions. And so The Plug was really my way to start synthesizing what I saw happening with tech startups, with VCs really trying to aim to fund Black businesses and Black startups. Gotcha. And then cities themselves also developing funds around diversity and inclusion. And so wanting to tell the story in a format that would mirror things like a Bloomberg or a Wall Street Journal, but something that specifically spoke about Black innovation. And so that was the impetus behind The Plug. And I am so excited to be partnered up with Word. We are working together, particularly on doing more reporting on Black startups, Black and brown startups throughout the Philadelphia area. So I'm super, super excited, and that's who we are.
Listen, you ain't the only one that's excited, honey. Okay. Seriously, because we do need that. We do need that. And this kind of partnership, I think is golden. And I'm really looking forward to where we go from here and continuing to build upon it. So for those of you who may not be familiar with the folks we have on this panel, I need you to know that this is like an all-star lineup. And I am familiar with each and every one of them in some way, shape, form, or capacity, whether it is through, my own company, whether it's through just networking in Philly as an entrepreneur or as a freelance journalist. Every single person that I'm about to talk to, I have literally, I'm familiar with how about this work they are, okay? And I'm excited because now you get to also be familiar with the work that they do, and that is important. So there are 3 people you have not yet heard from: Heather Howes, Taib Smith, and Sylvester Mobley. And so in that order, can each of you very briefly let the folks know a little bit about who you are, what you do, and what your mission is right now as a Black innovator in tech?
Happy to. It's a pleasure to be here, an honor to be here. I'm also a contributor to the Livelihood show with Charles, and that's really fun. And it's Joss Duncan who brought me into that opportunity. So I want to say thank you, shout out to her.
Yes.
I'm a serial entrepreneur. I was born in LA. So I'm a California person by origin. I went to UC Berkeley as an undergraduate. I was recruited to play basketball there, and ended up not playing ball, but working and learning about the achievement gap, and wrote my honors thesis at Cal about that. And that really sent me into, I guess it's been 30 years now that I've been working to try to create equitable opportunities for Black and brown folks, especially, and Indigenous folks in the areas of education and workforce development. And I said I'm a serial entrepreneur. I guess I should say social entrepreneur, because I've really been dedicated to trying to solve big social problems. And so in the late 1990s, I built SF Works, which trained 11,000 women who were on welfare for living wage jobs and got them hired into those jobs. I created another nonprofit called EARN, which helped low-income people save for their first assets, acquire their first homes, their first small businesses, or additional education. We've had 30,000 San Franciscans acquire their first assets. And then in 2012, I built a company called Pathbright, which is a digital portfolio platform that I was selling into universities and colleges. I wanted to, for public institution students to have the best of technology to learn and to get their best jobs and show their best selves. And we have about 6 million people on that platform today.
Wow.
I sold it at the end of 2015. And since then, I've been doing a mix of investing and other startup activities. And so right now I'm working on another startup that really will push employers to do better about hiring talent who are diverse and represent the diversity of our country.
Gotcha. Thank you so much, Heather Howes. Taib, when Heather mentioned activity, a lot of activity happening, I instantly thought about you because I follow you on Instagram, and you were literally just out in these streets like about an hour ago, maybe even 30 minutes ago, out, I believe, in West Philly. So let folks know a little bit about who you are and what you're doing, what you got cooking.
So similar to Heather, I'm a serial entrepreneur. And, people talk about their motivations for entrepreneurship. And, to be frank, my motivation has always been fear of poverty. I grew up in redline communities. My formative years, I went to underfunded schools. And my mother taught me very early that no institution, no school, and no person was going to have my best interest more than her or me. And, I didn't embrace the nomenclature of entrepreneurship probably until about 10 years ago. But, in the communities we come from, we call it hustling. Mm-hmm. So my first endeavor was probably throwing parties when I was in high school. And that evolved into a career. I was in the military. I got my GED, and when I was in the Navy, when I got out of the Navy, I worked in the restaurant business for like 5 years. After that, I ended up in the music business. I was a promoter. I worked for the Roots for a few years. I worked for a production company called Access Music Group, and then I started a magazine called 215 Magazine, and the parent company of 215 was Little Giant Creative, which is our agency that's been around for about 15 years, specializing in cultural competency. So my clients range from Drexel University, Temple University, the Knight Foundation, a host of clients, but we usually do everything from create websites for them, create printed materials, help them with marketing campaigns, or what we like to say, cultural competency. And we also have a proprietary event series we did for 10 years called Heineken Green Room. So we were Heineken's agency of record for about a decade in New York and Philadelphia. And then I started a co-working space 6 years ago in Philly called Pipeline. We have about 250 entrepreneurs and 20,000 square feet. That is pre-COVID occupancy. And then 3 years ago, I started a real estate company called Smith & Roller. And we have about 23 projects at different stages of development around the city. I have a new project coming online. We're about to lease, we're leasing 116 apartments at 3400 J Street in a building called J Central in partnership with Shift Capital. There's some other things, but I don't want to monopolize too much time because I got my brother Sylvester after me, and he works directly with the children. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Let's talk about him.
Listen, and something you all both share in common, among other things, but that I want to make sure in this moment we properly acknowledge and give our respects to both of you for your service to our country and for the sacrifices that you and each of your families have made, and to see the way in which you all are doing the things that y'all do. I just want to say thank you.
I appreciate that, but as a veteran against war, all right, and I don't want to set Sylvester up. To be frank as possible, if I had not gone to underfunded school districts, if I had not been sold a bill of goods about the GI Bill, my intellectual prowess would have better been served in an academic environment than some of the stuff I had to deal with, going from Philadelphia region to Millington, Tennessee, with the structurally racist environment. I didn't see my capacity.
Understood.
So
Thank you for saying that.
So in some ways, I'm very proud to be a veteran, but in others, I have a chip on my shoulder because of how many Black and brown men and women who are frontline workers for democracy and freedom, but then don't have that democracy and freedom in their own zip codes.
Listen, nothing but complete empathy and respect for that perspective, and so glad that you spoke to that. And Sylvester, coming to you next, I know you because of so much of the work that you do with our young people when it comes to coding, when it comes to really making sure that they're prepared for, a path in a tech economy, in the innovation economy. So can you let folks know a little bit about who you are and what you do?
All right, it helps so I'm not on mute.
Just a little bit.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here. Really appreciate it. I'm not going to argue with Taib now. We argue enough over text message.
Don't nobody want no smoke. Go on.
Floor is yours, Sylvester.
Like Taib, I served in the military. I think my perspective is probably different. The military was how I got into tech. I picked a job in the Air Force. Had no idea what the job was. The job ended up being computer network cryptographic switching systems. And that was how I got into tech. That was my entry. One of the things I give the Air Force credit for to this day, the Air Force has one of the best systems I've seen for taking non-technical people and preparing them for extremely technical careers. So I got a really good foundation from my education experience in the Air Force, which then set me up for my civilian career. So I ended up getting a degree in finance, but between the degree in finance and my education experience from the Air Force. The Air Force does this thing they call the Community College of the Air Force. And your experience in training equates to an associate's degree. So my education experience in the Air Force is the equivalent of an associate's degree in electrical engineering. So having that combination helped me to navigate through tech, and I ended up moving into management and managing technical teams and technical projects. So I call it my last real job before Coded by Kids was managing data infrastructure projects for Penn Medicine. Because of my experience in tech, especially in the software, data, and management side, one of the first things I realized when I went into tech was your diversity tends to get concentrated in the lowest paying jobs with the least opportunity for growth. As you move up into the highest paying jobs with the most opportunity for growth, there's very few people that look the way that I do, or look the way that we do. And from seeing that over and over, my own frustration pushed me to start Coded by Kids. And Coded by Kids is really modeled more after sports than it is an education organization. And I say that in the sense of, if you think about what professional sports does, where they have farm leagues, they're scouting kids in elementary school and following those kids in high school, we look at it the same way. We aren't an organization, our thing isn't, we're going to do a 2-week workshop or a 4-week workshop. We work with kids over the course of the long term. We say, how do we get a kid in the door and develop and mold that kid over the course of their lifetime? So we start at 3rd grade and we go to 24. The reason we go to 24 is we encourage and push all of our kids to go to college. We're preparing them to go into college. We believe higher education is important. Sometimes what happens is there's conversations about, is college for everyone, or should everyone go to college? There's a couple of things when it comes to Black children. We set low expectations for them. So we tend to set the bar very low. At the same time, we do a very poor job of preparing Black children for higher education, and then throw our hands up and say higher education isn't for everyone. Our belief is our responsibility to prepare them for it, and then they can go in whatever direction they want. So we work to prepare them for it the long term, encourage our students to go to school locally. So, we have a lot of young people at Drexel and UPenn and Temple. And if they go to school locally, they remain a part of the organization. So we'll continue supporting them while they're in college. So we're a long-term progressive developmental program that is solely focused on preparing underrepresented young people to move into leadership positions in tech. And we mean that literally. Everything we do is geared around how do we prepare our young people to either be founders of tech startups or move into leadership positions within the companies that they end up in.
And shout out to you all in the work that you're doing, and thinking about, this conversation that we're having, right? This Lomax Legacy panel presented in partnership with The Plug. So shout out to Sherelle. We're focusing on entrepreneurship, right? Speaking of paths, we're focusing on Black innovation. So curious to know, really briefly, how would you define Black innovation? And what do you see its current state as? Let's continue in the format that we've been. So we'll go with Tiffany, Sherelle, Heather, Taib, Sylvester. So Tiffany.
Well, for me, Black innovation definitely focuses on, economic opportunities, development. As Heather mentioned earlier, having assets and having ownership and having, legacy amongst your family, and really being able to have that financial literacy and that financial understanding of passing down from jobs to the understanding and importance of education to understanding the importance of ownership. I've been a full-time entrepreneur for 15 years, and this is my 3rd company. And understanding the importance of that was lost on past generations of my family. And, I'm still the only entrepreneur that I know within my family. And understanding the importance of owning a home and passing down that home was something I already knew was important, but I knew it was important from other people versus within my own family. And understanding that in order to create a legacy for my future family, that I needed to not only have the education and going to school and getting my business degree, but understanding the importance of ownership and multiple streams of income that I have between owning my company to the work I do in media, to the consulting that I do, and the ownership of owning my car and other things that I have, and passing that down to even my family, and having that conversation even with, you know, my mom, that is still kind of learning those things, even, you know, being at her age, and having those conversations throughout my family, and understanding that it's important to innovate and to understand technology, and the technology you're especially utilizing, but also how can you build it.
Got you.
And I realized that early, and I learned it early, and I started teaching it early once I got it myself and became that mentor to other folks, and working on these projects that I'm on. Like I always say, I work in the intersection of tech, media, and community, because everything I do has to do all three of those things, whether it's mentorship or entrepreneurship or volunteering my time. I'm on a lot of advisory boards and board of directors throughout the city, from the city of Philadelphia for workforce development, to volunteering for Microsoft, and teaching coding and other things to young girls that I've been doing for the last 5 years. So Black innovations is understanding your worth, and really showcasing it to the world through multiple ways.
Got you. And Sherelle?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what I can add that Tiffany hasn't referred to. Quite honestly, I think, oh yes, all of those things and above. I think for me, it is about having a sense of normalcy. I think sometimes we have these conversations about Black innovation as a subset of our existence. And the reality is that this is who we've always been. And of course, because of the restrictions and barriers that this country has provided in its insidiousness around racism, we're always having to self-actualize. But I want to see and understand for everyone's lexicon that Black innovation is just part of it, who it is that we are, that we have access to the right tools, the right resources, that this isn't something that only a certain group of people get into, that it's only the entrepreneurs that are innovative and are going to help build wealth. It's that all hands are on deck in ensuring the prosperity and progress of our communities, our families, our institutions, the longevity and the sustainability of us as a people, and to be able to realize that in our fullness. And so that is kind of the America that I'm working toward. And also, yes, on it from a family perspective, you know, I've had to do a lot of this road alone outside of my family. I actually have family from Detroit as well as Philadelphia. So I used to come to Philadelphia sometimes for the summers, and my great aunt lived on 27th Street over in North Philly, you know, and had lived in the same house for 60 plus years. And when I think about the legacy of being able to pass down generational wealth and some of the challenges and barriers I'm seeing from my own family, you know, I'm really the first one to kind of say, hey, here's how we can start to work together to provide new opportunities and ensure our own survival. And so I think that so many of us have similar stories, come from similar backgrounds, but one of the biggest things is that as a people, we are resilient. And I want us to remember that it's not just about the survival, right? It really is about what we're bringing into the table, what we're creating, that we're no longer just concerned about making sure the rent is paid, or kind of going after these very base level kinds of things, but that I can make sure that my nieces and nephews are the next rocket scientists, that, you know, we have the resources to send people to college or to help them fund their businesses.
That generational aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. Gotcha. And that it becomes normative, that it's not an anomaly. So that's what I'm working towards. And that is what I feel it is the future of the Black innovation economy.
Gotcha. And then we'll go to Heather, and then Taib and Sylvester.
Yeah, there's such a high level of conversation going on. I'm trying to figure out, you know, where can I add some value here? I will say that for me, innovation is a luxury oftentimes. When you think about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you know, you have to have your basic needs of shelter and food security and all those sorts of things handled before you have the freedom to be creative, which is part of the innovation experience for me. And so when I think about freedom, I think about economic freedom, I think about physical freedom, and I think about philanthropic, social kinds of freedom, and so I am about all those things. And you know, economists have been, there's a slew of economists reports that came out in 2017 saying that that the median wealth of Black people would be at zero by 2050, and for Latin people 2070. And I talked to one of the people who actually did the research and who said that that actually they were being soft on us, and we're going to be below zero in terms of wealth if we don't change things in a systemic, serious way. We can't like actually be just dealing with little bits and pieces on the peripheries of little things. Don't get me wrong, every single life matters. Every single person that we impact makes a difference. But we have to push on the political front and every other front, the big companies and the jobs and the entrepreneurship and the whole ecosystem. And we have to start investing in ourselves in a different kind of way. And that's why, rather than retiring, I spent a couple of years with Bill and Melinda Gates, working with Melinda Gates on pivotal ventures, where she's trying to invest in women entrepreneurs. I worked with Bill, and I helped them build a whole new portfolio called Equitable Futures to invest beyond the traditional systems of education that have never tried to serve our kids. But we have to think about how we build for ourselves, and we build at scale. And I believe we only do that by really working together to build the ecosystem. I have to say, I was part of this lean-in group of Black women at senior levels of tech in Silicon Valley. So we have a home in Oakland, California, my wife and I, but we also have one here in Washington, D.C., where we're staying put right now. And when I was in Silicon Valley, I would really give the business to my friends who were the chief diversity officer at this large company or that. And I would say to them, it doesn't help if you're the only one and you've kind of made an agreement to be the Black, but don't say anything, don't have critical mass, don't invest in us, don't do M&A with Black companies, don't do anything of significance, but just sit there and co-sign on some stuff that's wrong, like all lives matter. And so we've got to do better, and we only do it when we link up together. These are brilliant people, but we have to pull it together. And I think that that's what I would say. And I've been behind the scenes in a lot of politics, because we have to be able to have politicians to hold to account. And the minute Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are elected at the top of the ticket, we have to hold our legislators and those two people and their administration accountable to doing better by us.
Ooh, child, you didn't.
Don't get me started,
you
though.
already got folks that's revving up for that. Taib, your take on Black innovation, the state of it, where we're at right now, where we go. So
the first thought that I had when you asked the question earlier before everyone gave comments. So I think of Black innovation. I think that within the history of Western culture, Black people were actually dealt with as not just a product, but as an innovative technology to, clear the land, to build the United States, to create the 10x differential in household wealth between Black families and white families that Heather was talking about from the 2017 studies, where I think it was actually Black families were on pace, I think, to reach zero at 2043, and Latino families, it was 2053. But I don't doubt you at all, Heather, that it's usually worse than the data even tells, right? So Sylvester and I have been in conversations with, and also with Tiffany, like we've talked about this stuff at Miami Tech Week, where we spent our own money to go talk about these issues out of town, right? And we had an experience, I recall very vividly, where we were looking at Miami Tech Week and saying, arguably, we have more collectively in Philadelphia, but we don't have the support of the infrastructure and the institutional partners who don't see us as tech leaders. They see us as people to run workforce development programs. And to be honest, there are billions of dollars for workforce development programs, but virtually none to mentor or create a pipeline of ownership and restorative justice and equity for Black and brown people. Because when you talk about so-called entrepreneurship and the startup economy, very rarely do people talk about that. Probably 98% of the venture capital money goes to white men, and 2% of that is split between women, all women, Black people, all Black people, and others, POC, right? So within that, that's split between MIT, Silicon Valley, maybe Austin, and a couple places in New York, and Philadelphia, which is 45% Black, right? Which is 67% POC. If you look at how our tech discussions, if you look at what the optics of entrepreneurship are, it very rarely looks like this room. And Sylvester and I have been in many rooms where we talk about how in African American vernacular they say you need to see it to be it, right? So if you turn on TV, and shout out to Sherelle for the plug for lifting up these images and these stories, but very rarely will you see anything in popular culture that tells our stories, right? And I know many people around the country who do this work and are as articulate as all we are, but it's hard to get us in the popular culture narrative as identities. And there's a bunch of, I'll be frank, step and fetch it images of Black people who are doing things that are actually employees of white structures that are projecting Black culture, right? And to go back to innovation, who is more innovative in culture than Black people anywhere across the diaspora, right? It's very hard to move a product or to create a technology where you're not trying to put it within a context of making it cool through the lens of Black culture, Black history, Black technology, music, art, culture, visual art, so on and so forth. So historically, we have always been, deeply ingrained in the DNA of innovation, right? How we participate in the equity and the monetization of that is usually as the product or the producer from a labor perspective. And one of the complications I would say in the last 5 years is, I think Heather was alluding to, diversity inclusion officers, diversity, equity, inclusion conferences and task force and dinners are diffuse means of talking about something to make white people or white institutions feel or look better, but not changing a goddamn thing. Because all of the platforms that we use, Google, to all Facebook, they don't have more than 5%, Black and brown employment, all right? They're not hiring, they're not doing their procurement with Black-owned companies. So until we push and change public policy that demands that we have parity in terms of our participation in the capital stack, our participation in terms of how the contracts flow, I haven't had a boss since 1999, all right? And I am very fortunate that in my makeup, I don't think I could ever work for anyone again, to be honest, right? So I'm not even comfortable with the CEO because I'm not answering to any board. I'm not answering to anyone. I'm a principal. I'm a partner, right? And I'm trying to
talk that.
I'm trying to encourage other young people to imagine themselves as leaders and imagine themselves as a part of the leadership and part of the ownership, and not always be participating as something that is serving. Got you.
Let's go to Sylvester.
So going last, I'm gonna kind of take pieces from what everyone else said. I think we first have to recognize that if you start talking about Black innovation is present in any place you go in the world. Like there isn't a place you can go in the world and not see the impacts or the results of Black innovation. So I think it's important to recognize the just how significant of an impact Black people have had on the world through innovation. Our creativity, our ability to be innovators and to drive not just culture, but we innovate in almost every area, whether it's media, whether it's culture, whether it's technology. So we have to recognize that. I think where there's often a problem or often a disconnect is we will create and we will innovate and then what we're creating and innovating on gets co-opted. It's no longer ours. And, you know, it's interesting because in time, people often forget or don't even understand that that thing that they love came from us. You know, I find it interesting, having had the opportunity to travel the way that I have, to see people embracing something that originated from Black people, but those same people are unwilling to embrace Black people. You know, so you have this interesting disconnect. But I think we do have to recognize that, you know, we are as a people innovative and creative, and we're creators. But we have to work to ensure that we are also the owners of what we innovate on and what we create. And we're able to be the ones to drive it forward and scale it and build it. You know, even in, you know, and kind of to Heather's point, you know, when I think about the problems that we're trying to address in our communities, we have innovative solutions to the problems we're trying to address in our own communities. But if you look at funding for organizations that do this work, Black leaders aren't funded to do the work. You know, Stanford did an interesting research report showing just the lack of funding, and even showing in the same type of organization. And they compared an organization that works to help Black males. One organization was led by a white executive director. The other organization that works to help Black males is led by a Black executive director. And there was a huge difference in funding. So even when, you know, you're doing the same work, you're not funded the same way. You're not supported the same way. People won't get behind you and give you the same resources and infrastructure. We see it happening not just in Philly, but throughout the country. We have the ability, we've proven our ability to innovate and create. What we need is, one, to back each other, but we also need to force, you know, the larger society to back us. And I'm saying force because, you know, as history has shown, society won't back us willingly. So we do have to push them to get behind Black leaders who are innovators and who are building and creating.
And to put their money, right, their money behind, their funding, that access to capital to really invest in that kind of way.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, like, and I don't want to monopolize too much time, but in the work that I do, there's a conversation that often comes up around corporations and foundations and people not wanting to appropriately fund the work. You know, there are a lot of major corporations that don't want to write checks at all. There's foundations that, you know, they want you to go through a 30-page application for $5,000. The thing I often say is, we didn't get to the point that we got to because people, you know, were writing checks. We got to the point that we're at through intentional disinvestment. You can't solve intentional disinvestment with more disinvestment, which is essentially what, you know, we see people doing. So, yeah, I mean, like, people have to write checks and be willing to put dollars to, you know, backing people and solving these problems.
Listen, if you're tuned in, I just hope you have a notebook out or your notes pulled up on your phone and you're scooping up these gems. This is the Lomax Legacy Panel presented in partnership with The Plug. We are exploring Black innovation, in particular when it comes to the tech economy or innovation economy, I should say. We have Tiffany Stander, Sherelle Dorsey, Heather Howes, Taib Smith, and Sylvester Mobley, each bringing their unique lived experiences and expertise to this conversation. And shout out to the folks who are tuned in over on WURD TV via Facebook Live, YouTube, or WURDradio.com. You can see their faces. So as each of them are chiming in on this, you know, you got folks that are snapping, folks that are like nodding their head in agreement. And, you know, you get to have a different experience for that. And with that, I'll say, make sure if you have questions, you drop them in the comment section, especially over on Facebook or YouTube, so that I can make sure I do my best to get those answered in the short time that we have with them. The phone lines are also open. So if you want to, because we got to make sure we get all of them. Dang, y'all. I'll say this. email me your questions, and I will see how I can do my best to get them answered. Sincerely, Sarita at gmail.com, SYREETA, because we will need to make sure that we keep this conversation going. This should not be a one and done ya. Although Founders Day is definitely something that we are here to celebrate all day today, we want to make sure we keep these conversations going beyond this very special day. And with us getting short on time, I want to make sure we get to the meat of this conversation. And that is the question of, can Philly's tech economy create Black wealth? Can it really create Black wealth? And Sherelle, I know you're in Atlanta. Heather, you're between DC and California. Tiffany, Taib, and Sylvester, as far as I know and understand, you are largely based here in Philly, but y'all be out here in these streets moving and shaking and getting it done. Based on all of your experiences in geographical locations or ties, when you think about, for example, what's happening in Philly, what's happening out in Cali and Silicon Valley, and what's happening in Philly, can our tech economy create Black wealth? Do you believe that that's possible? And I'll also add this. I hear it a lot in the arts, and the art scene, that you have to leave Philly to blow up, and then, maybe you can decide to come back. Is that the case also with tech? I think that's a deeper question too that I would love to get into. But for now, just that main question of can Philly's tech economy create Black wealth? Let's take it back the other way this time. Let's go with Sylvester, Taib, Heather, Sherelle, and Tiffany.
Heck, I want to say a whole lot. Go ahead.
We're going to reverse it a little bit. Let's go ahead, Sylvester.
I'm gonna say a couple of things. One, for me, starting in tech in the city in 2001 and having been in the tech community, in the tech space as long as I have, there was a time where everyone, it didn't matter whether you're Black, white, it didn't matter what you look like. If you were trying to build a startup in the city of Philadelphia, you had to leave at some point. You weren't going to raise the investment capital that you needed to raise in the city. You weren't going to be able to hire the talent that you needed to hire in the city. You were going to reach a point and had to leave. We've gotten to a point where we're finally seeing companies not have to leave, which is encouraging because I think that we can all reap the benefits of that. But in terms of can the tech space in Philly create wealth and better position Black people, it has to. I think the question is the wrong question. Mm-hmm. Right now, there is data that's been released. McKinsey did a lot of research into it. There's a think tank that was also doing research into it that shows Black people are concentrated in the jobs that have the highest likelihood of going away because of automation. So you look at the city of Philadelphia, which is 45% Black. You then look at the jobs that Black people in the city of Philadelphia are in, and you see that Black people in the city are concentrated in jobs that will not exist. So if we do not get Black people into that space, if we do not position Black people so that they can build wealth in tech and they can reap the benefits of tech, we're going to have, mass unemployment and underemployment. The future that we're going towards, if we can't do this, is not an optimistic future.
Gotcha.
So it's not a question of can we, it's a question of how we, because we don't have a choice, because we have to. And when people say well, not everyone wants to work in tech, I over-index on tech. And usually what I say to people is at one point, everyone worked on farms. And then people stopped working on farms, and people worked in factories, and everyone worked in factories. And then people stopped. At some point, we have to recognize the direction that society is going, and we have to move with it.
Gotcha. Tayyip?
It goes back to, Sylvester and I used to have these meetings with other people in the cohort, for about 2 or 3 years, 6 years ago. And one of the topics of conversation is, in the absence of having a Black Silicon Valley, why not Philadelphia? All right, so within 100 miles of Philadelphia, you have more wealth than anywhere else in the United States, if not Western civilization, between New York, DC, and a concentration of academic institutions, Ivy institutions, biotech companies. University of Pennsylvania is my favorite institution to be a critic of, with a $14 billion endowment, bordered by some pockets of poverty as high as 36%. And some of that property was stolen from Black families in the era of eminent domain and urban renewal, right? So when we talk about creating wealth, oftentimes some of the largest fortunes were actually created in partnership with the city and state through subsidy or through contracts, right? So because we represent so much of the population and we've been so historically X'd out of participating in aspects of the 20th century economy and now the beginning of the tech economy, we'd have to have public policy that addresses some form of restitution and investment in Black and brown people, all right? From education, from a holistic perspective, and not individually investing in, reentry, not investing only in African-American women. We need to deal with the holistic Black community, from all aspects, because we're dealing with a confluence of socioeconomic issues that created that 10x differential. So I think, yes, we can, but we have to have leadership that approaches these things with courage, and we have to have some level of solidarity across class in terms of how we are making our community whole. Because just to be frank, we have a history of people who often get in the room and they speak for themselves, or they speak for their position, or they speak for their institution, or they speak for their socioeconomic class. And I got to give shouts out to the Lomaxes, because this is Founders Day, and Walter Lomax was kind enough to meet with me a few times before he passed. And that is something I'll never forget, right? And I have a relationship with Charles Lomax. He gave me some advice just yesterday that made me choke laughing, because I was critiquing Black leadership, and he told me, Taib, if you don't get over yourself, go and look in the mirror and look at leadership. And I was kind of like, oh, that's how I talk to my mentees, right? So absolutely, we can do this in Philadelphia, but we have to do it holistically, and it can't be a short sprint. We got to have a 25-year eye on the prize of how we're going to make our community whole, and we have to hold everybody's feet to the fire, no matter what they look like.
Heather, your take on this? Do you think it's possible?
Do I think what's possible?
Can Philly's tech economy, or just the tech economy in general, create Black wealth? Is it a vehicle for creating Black wealth?
So can we? Absolutely, we can. Will we? Is the question of the day. The history of this country is, we literally built this country. And the economics were based on slavery. So when it was said that the innovation model of this country was slavery, that's the real truth. I myself am a descendant of Sally Hemings and Thomas Jefferson, and also a descendant of one of our ancestors who went back to Liberia, went back to Africa, and was the first president of Liberia. So I know we have the intellectual ability, we have the innovation gene, we have all of that. But can we, in a society that has really taught people to be self-interested above all else, can we go back and remember all the sacrifices our ancestors made so that we could vote, so that we could not be slaves, so we could do all this stuff? And can we? So my daughter Maya is 24 years of age, Black woman who went to Howard, now works for Boeing. And about every other week, we have to have a conversation with her about why she can't quit there, because she's tired of working for all these old white men who don't get it here and they don't get it there. We have sacrificed so much and done so much to pass the baton. She should be many, many steps ahead of us, but she always has to think about her family, her extended community, and how is she bringing everybody along with her. And so, yes, we have the ability. And so Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., Atlanta, Georgia, like all these, LA, where I come from, Oakland, we all have the ability. Will we do it? That's the question of the hour. And I continue to be amazed at how self-interested people can become so quickly, and how small ball we can play. And I'm disappointed, honestly, in a lot of the generation right behind us, who have been just trying to hold on to the bitter end to get every shekel they can get, without bringing up, without mentoring this generation of leaders.
Can you speak to that? So I want to, because some folks, they can't see you, they don't know what generation or age group you're speaking to. So
I'm 51. Really, okay, I'm 51. My children's generation is 20.
You better work 20. That. Sorry, go ahead.
So I'm talking about, my wife and I were both 51, and so I'm talking about the people who were, who are probably like 70s, 80s, like my parents' generation, who held on to these organizations, but they didn't point out, the men and women, young men and women, who they wanted to bring up to be the leaders of today. And they didn't tell us like the roadmap and how we're supposed to play into it. And so I feel a very strong obligation to build as much of the roadmap as I can before I'm too tired to do it, so that they can just plug in, and it's the Sherelles and the Tiffany's and everybody else who can just run with it. You know what I'm saying? And that's what we have to do.
Well, you set it up for Sherelle. Your take your take on it.
I love that. I love that, Heather, because I don't think we talk enough about sometimes that internal competition of, as you're coming up, leaders feeling threatened by that, instead of saying, how do we work collectively together? Because what we lack, quite honestly, is that knowledge of how to navigate systems and how to navigate policy and how to do things without getting frustrated because they're taking a long time. Especially, my generation of millennials, like, we are instant gratification. And I remember like really going hard in the paint and getting upset and not realizing there's a certain stature that you kind of have to walk into different kinds of rooms with, but not having necessarily the mentorship to help you really navigate that. And I also want to bring that into, because I feel like everyone here has already really mentioned, like, yes, can Philly become? Absolutely. We all have the potential, but there are some unique barriers. And one of the things that I feel like is really important to mention is really dealing with the trauma, really processing the trauma. I mean, I still have PTSD from working for startups, quite honestly, and sort of having to navigate that as a Black woman. And, as Taib had said, working for someone else would be such a significant challenge unless it was, an opportunity that really gave me a sense of autonomy, and I knew that I was going to be respected, and I knew that I was going to be treated well, because in a traditional work environment, I've always been mistreated, and it's like, and I have the credentials, I have the education, I came from the good schools, I have the well-traveled, well-spoken, respectable sort of Negro stature. And yet it doesn't matter. I am still looked at as other, right? And that takes a toll on your psyche. It takes a toll on your hope. I'll say this: about 2 weeks ago, my father passed away, and it was a complications from, he had already had underlying health conditions, but then layering that on with COVID, just making for a disaster, which I know a lot of us have had or been connected to people who've lost someone during this year. And as I reflect on his life and I learned just more about him as a person, as a man, I realized, he helped fight in the military and still came back to, as Taib was referencing, like, just not being respected as a citizen. Not really being able to fully actualize himself as a man in a country that he was born in, that his ancestors helped to build. That's real. And when I look at the trauma of his life and some of the things that he passed down as a result of never having a safe space, of never being able to walk in the world as a full-blooded person without having to be afraid, for being a dark-skinned Black man growing up in Texas and eventually moving to California, the reality is that we pass all of that stuff down. There's actual research that talks about weathering.
Yeah.
That's how it shows up for us, even at Black women across socioeconomic spectrums. That's why our maternal health rates are a challenge. And I think that, you know, for us to be actualized, whether it's Philadelphia or Atlanta or DC or, you know, Nebraska and other places where Black folks live and got there through generations of migration, the reality is we have to have safe spaces. And this is why COVID and having to be at home and not having the Black-owned co-working spaces or not having the church house or the house of worship to be able to go and be in community, it's going to be really tough on our communities. We have to be able to address the mental health toll and challenges we're going to be up against as we continue to be stuck at home.
Gotcha.
Or stuck without jobs, or not being able to provide for our families, or not being able to both work a job and teach our kids. All of these things are going to have tremendous impacts on our communities. Yeah. And it's beyond just being able to get another fund together for Black startups. Again, we've got to, as we said earlier, like that holistic look and that holistic lens of we're processing trauma at the same time, trying to survive the day-to-day, at the same time trying to be, you know, lifting up our communities, at the same time trying to save our sons and our daughters and have healthy kids and ensure that our community has what we need. And I'll, you know, shout out just Black women, because we carry a lot of the load ourselves, a lot of time.
It's all those things.
Absolutely. Yeah. And back to that whole mentorship thing, and I'll be honest, and I'm just gonna put it out here because we're at this point, we're all family. You know, it is also being in rooms sometimes with Black men who don't want to share the baton with Black women. Or
now,
expect us to,
we need a whole nother panel discussion. Okay, all right. Yeah, no, I'm about to say I don't know, yo. We gonna have to like. I don't know how we're gonna get this. We're gonna have to organize another panel. But you're all bringing such important perspectives to the conversation, and especially, you know, looking at this through the lens of Founders Day, looking at it through the lens of, you know, Dr. Lomax, right? And hearing the importance of safe spaces, of mentorship, of holistic approach to our wellness, to our economic prosperity, to Black wealth. I mean, those were all things that he was about. He was for, and he didn't just, you know, talk about it. He actually did it. Like WURD radio, the fact that we're even having this conversation right now is an absolute reflection of that and of his forward thinking and what the next generation needs to be able to have, or the kind of intergenerational conversations that are going to need to happen for us all to move forward. So I'm here for, you know, so all of what we're bringing to the table in this moment. Tiffany, let's go ahead and get to you, because we're literally starting to run extremely low on time, and I want to make sure we hear from you, because I know you said as soon as the question got dropped, you was like, "Ooh, I'm ready." So I appreciate your patience.
So much to say, and I'm glad everybody spoke first, because just hearing everything from, you know, Sylvester to Heather of like, we have to and we can, and I'm gonna speak just generally on Philly just because I'm born and raised here. Mm-hmm. There's so much resources and money here in Philadelphia, and it goes back to what Sylvester said about needing those folks to write checks. When I first started Stimulus, you know, I was self-funded from my previous companies, and then when it was time to, you know, raise funding and knowing that there's money here, still having to go outside of Philadelphia to get money and then get money here in Philadelphia. And I'm now a part of the conversations of, and outside of art, tech, like you do have to leave Philly to get customers and get certain things. And that's just across the board. I don't know if that's most cities, but Philly has this way of just talking and having so many meetings before they want to close one project and one investment and company. And you have to leave to get appreciated for some reason in this city. And once you start to do that, then you start to get the funding here, the customers here. So now I'm a part of different projects of like, how do we buy locally? You have so many anchor, amazing big companies here that buy 1.9 billion of their annual, you know, purchases in other cities versus their own city where they're headquartered at, and helping that, and stop having those conversations, but putting an actual goal of by Q2, how much are you going to spend with local companies, whether it's minority owned, women owned, veteran owned companies. So making sure that we're holding people accountable, not having a bunch of meetings back to back. And Philly is known for a bunch of meetings, right? So just making sure that we're closing that. But then also looking at the trauma that Sherelle mentioned, like you can create wealth, Black wealth here in Philadelphia and elsewhere.
There you
and
go.
elsewhere, but making sure that that trauma of, I'm also in media. So I report these stories from George Floyd and everything. So to go from seeing these stories and having to pitch to a white male and hearing the things that they say and knowing what they're saying, and then someone mentioning my locks as, is that professional in technology, and then having to go and still, you know, run my company and manage my team. That trauma of what's happening outside of and what's in the news in other cities, and then what's happening here locally is traumatic, and it's stuff that we talk about a lot, and it's hard to pick yourself up and go back out and speak to another white male about money or another white female about money to get your first check. And we're in supply chain and purchasing, so a lot of people within our industry is about 90% white. So it's overly proving yourself as you have this technology company. And I can thankfully say now we are an investor-backed company, but not through trial and error, and not through not understanding 15 years of strength of having to pick myself back up again to like, okay, I gotta know for no good reason, but now I'm gonna go get that yes. And now we have that. We have an amazing team and investors that back us, and even some money from the city of Philadelphia. So it's one of those things that it's like we can create that generational wealth, but until we recognize and understand the trauma that goes along with what we see in everyday life, that we take back to our teams and our families that we have to deal with on a regular basis, it'll be hard for us to even ourselves appreciate it, because I can be excited 1 minute and working with my team, and then the next minute I see something, you know, crazy on the news and my heart drops and I have to report on it the next day. And I'm in tears at that point, you know? So we need a way to talk about the trauma in a better way.
And it sounds like a lot of this from each of you, it really gets back to how we're framing that question, right? It's not a matter of can this happen, it's how. How do we go about doing that? What are the systems that we need to examine? Who are the folks that we need to make sure we hold accountable, or that we even look at and say, hey, you know, you can do this, or I can do this, and here's how we get this done. So I'm so thankful for each and every one of you for joining us, and for folks who have been chiming in over on social media. Marla said, in addition to greeting us and saying good afternoon, she said, salute to all the panelists. It's a much needed dialogue. You know it's real when they start dropping gifts, y'all. And so they dropping gifts, they're giving standing ovations. I just want y'all to know, when people drop gifts, that means you've been dropping gems, okay? And she also said hashtag facts, heavy hitters. Shauna is definitely appreciating the conversation, and Cynthia's, you know, just solidifying the gentleman on our panel and the truth that they've been speaking. Shauna appreciating this conversation and adding that partnership, ownership is what we're looking for, right? Not servants of their purpose, right? Like identifying that for ourselves. Jennifer added, we are worth more than we are willing to ask for, let alone demand. And she went on to add, nice to have people on both sides of the corporate power structure. Extra nice when those on the inside bring contracts and contacts outside. So just some really good feedback for folks who have been following this conversation, and it's just about time for us to get out of here. So I know Taib had to jump off, but for our panelists who are left, Tiffany, Sherelle, Heather, and Sylvester, in about a minute or less, can you just give us your final thoughts? And I know, because y'all got a lot of expertise and a lot of lived experience. So trying to break this down in a minute or less might be a bit of a challenge, but a minute or less, what are your final thoughts or reflections on Black innovation as it relates to building wealth through the tech economy or innovation economy? And let's start with Sherelle. We'll go to then Heather, we'll go to Tiffany, and then Sylvester.
Great. I'll just say we can't afford to not know anything. We have way too many tools at our disposal. And I understand sometimes with generational gaps, it can be a lot, but we cannot wait for somebody to come and save us. At the end of the day, whether it is sharing information. Google has Grow with Google, free classes online to get certifications. There are a lot of companies who are now saying, we're gonna look at people who do not have college degrees. There are free online programs. There are low cost online programs. As a community, particularly getting into technology has never been easier in terms of being able to be self-taught, self-paced. A lot of times as engineers, you're Googling code anyway, but like, just step up. Just step up. We cannot afford to keep getting left behind and to miss out. And I understand everyone has their own layers and levels of unique barriers, but YouTube University is probably the best resource. So we cannot afford to say that we don't know anything. If you can't find somebody to teach you, you teach yourself. You get on the podcast, you listen to the kind of information you need, you subscribe to Harvard Business Review, you subscribe to Bloomberg, you get all the free content and resources you need, and you stay relentless. Because unless we keep knocking on the door, no one's gonna come let us in. So we're gonna have to be self-starters in this space. And I'm telling this to my cousins who just graduated from high school and had to delay their college enrollment. I said, look, it's time to stay busy. This is not the time to relax. We still got to apply pressure.
We got work to, look, that is my phrase, apply pressure, continue to apply pressure. Heather?
Yes, I'm going to just build on what Sherelle just said. First of all, we are in the midst of the fourth industrial revolution. So technology has already taken over every sector of business and industry. That's not debatable anymore. So let's move on and let's get with the program. Secondly, I'm going to plug OHub Futures, which I'm affiliated with. We're launching a new class of Momentum at Morehouse, which is coding for people. You don't have to have a degree, but you can learn full stack coding in that program. We're going to be launching a cybersecurity program with Howard University. There are many different ways in which you can afford to get the training and upskilling you require right now and help getting that first new economy job. But I will also say we have to find, vis-a-vis the mental health conversation we were having, we need to find every way in which we can love ourselves and each other and be soft and gentle with each other while being encouraging and coaching people to do their best and to stretch.
Gotcha. And Tiffany?
I'm going to build off what Heather just said. Innovation and building in any industry, but especially technology, starts with self-awareness. Understanding who you are, who you want to be, what you do and what you want to do within technology. And having that self-awareness allows you to handle what you need to handle for yourself, but also be happy for others and to help others. A lot of things that happen within these industries is jealousy, and it's not, helping others in partnership. And there's a way for us to partner and truly build generational wealth and innovation without, hurting each other, and do it in partnership, whether it's funding or education, in partnership within companies, hiring each other, building that amazing team. So it always starts with self-awareness, understanding who you are to allow you to benefit others.
Gotcha. All right. And Sylvester?
We've got to invest in each other. I think I may have cut off, but we've got to invest in each other and not look for other people to invest in us.
Gotcha, Heather. Gotcha. And Sylvester?
I'm going to plug an initiative that we launched recently called One Philadelphia. One Philadelphia stands for Opportunity and Equity in Philadelphia. And it also is an acknowledgement of the fact that there isn't one Philadelphia. There's very different Philadelphias depending on what neighborhood you live in and what you look like. And One Philadelphia is actually, it's that ecosystem that Heather was talking about. We essentially said, what does it take to get someone from kindergarten through college and into a tech and innovation career? Like, what does that end-to-end system look like in a holistic way? So, some of the organizations that we're partnering with aren't tech organizations. They're literacy organizations. If a kid is struggling with reading and writing, it doesn't matter how much, technology they learn. Mental health is a component. So what does it look like to build that end-to-end system and have everyone in the ecosystem all have one goal and all move in the same direction? So we've been able to bring to the table funders, we've been able to bring to the table community organizations, higher education organizations, and all say, hey, we should all be focused on getting Black and brown people in the city of Philadelphia into the tech and innovation space, have a singular focus, and all work to move people through it. So I'm going to plug that. That's what we're doing. One of the things that's going to be coming up as a part of that is we're training 40 community innovation coaches. And basically, as a part of the awareness and helping people understand what the opportunities are, we want people in the community to understand what the startup space is, to understand what's happening in tech, and be able to educate their communities.
Gotcha.
Be able to go into the community centers, be able to go on people's porches and talk to people of all ages, of all backgrounds, and make sure people understand what's there, what's available, and how do they get into it and how do they access it. So we're going to train 40 community innovation coaches from neighborhoods throughout the city of Philadelphia as a part of it.
Awesome. Awesome. So listen, loves, especially those who are tuned in over on Word TV via Facebook Live. I've been busy over there dropping websites, all of that good stuff that are tied to each of our panelists, right? So for Heather, who mentioned OHub, Heather, if I'm correct, they can go to opportunityhub.co. To learn more about, look, I'm Googling, I'm multitasking over here. I got y'all. All right, so for Heather and OHub, you can head to opportunityhub.co. Tiffany, I know they can go to TIFFANIE, don't put a Y in her name, IESTANARD.com. Is there any other website that is that like kind of the main place that they can go for all the things that you have going on?
Yeah, that lists everything that I'm doing. And then my company website is getstimulus.io. We focus on helping companies make better purchasing decisions. So whether you're a small company or a large corporation, we help you simplify that process. So you can
Gotcha.
go to either or and find out more about me.
Okay. And then Coded by Kids, Sylvester, I have coded, CODED by kids, KIDS.com, where they can learn more about Coded by Kids. But with this new initiative, One Philadelphia, is there a home for that or anywhere that you might want to send them, or is Coded by Kids kind of the best place for them to go?
Coded by Kids is the best place to go.
Okay.
If they leave their email in our email mailing list, we'll be able to send them updates as they come out.
Okay. And then second to last, Tayyib, I know we have Pipeline Philly, right? They just Google that, but I know you also have some other things going on. What's the best website for folks to go to either get in touch with you or just, stay tuned into the projects that you have going on?
.com, smithroller.com is my real estate company. Our new space that we're opening is iflabphilly.com. That stands for Idea Factory, where we will be doing technical assistance for entrepreneurs. Our first space opens in Kensington, November 1st, and I'm also working on a 27,000 square foot entrepreneurship hub at 53 North 52nd Street, which will be the second space.
Yes.
And you can follow me online, most spaces at 215 Taib.
All right, and I have to wrap up here, and who better to end with than with Sherelle Dorsey of The Plug. Sherelle, TP as in The Plug, insights.com, the best place for folks to go for The Plug, correct?
That's absolutely right. Sign up for our weekly briefing, become a member. We definitely want you part of the community.
All right. So listen, I want to thank each and every one of our esteemed panelists for making today's discussion, right? This Lomax Legacy panel presented in partnership with The Plug, focusing on Black innovation and entrepreneurship possible. Y'all, get excited if you're not already with this livelihood initiative that we have going on. You can head to WURDworks.com to learn more about that. Make sure you share it. I'm dropping that in the Facebook Live comment section as well. So help us get the word out so that we can get Philadelphians employed and provided with the information that they need. A very special thank you and appreciation to all of the partners, sponsors, members, listeners, y'all, viewers who are making Founders Day possible, and love and appreciation always to the Lomax family and for Dr. Lomax's legacy. Up next, we continue with Lomax Legacy panels, getting ready to get into a official website launch conversation with Sarah Lomax Reese and Roxanne Stanford, sponsored by Night Linfest Local News Transformation Fund. So I'm your host, sincerely, Sarita. It's been an absolute pleasure to spend this time with you on Founders Day. Stay tuned.
2